Tonight, GM lays off hundreds of Ontario auto workers.
It's terrible. I mean, it's devastating.
On the heels of job cuts at Stellantis and Trump's tariffs, the growing concern for the auto industry. The campaign is more than half done, so time for a very special ad issue on the road. Taking questions from a live audience. And the Canadian star's plan to honor a 9-year-old girl.
I was just really taken by Grace. Her name kind of said it all.
His pitch to a local city council to cement her legacy.
From CBC News, this is The National with Erica Johnson.
Thanks for joining us. A GM plant in southern Ontario is going idle, cutting hundreds of jobs and driving concerns about the fate of Canadian auto manufacturing under the shadow of tariffs. Demand for the electric vans by GM in Ingersoll was sagging even before Donald Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian-made vehicles. Now GM says it's closing the plant until at least October. And when it reopens, nearly 500 jobs won't be coming back. Kyle Back shows us the impact on workers, the town, and the federal election campaign.
GM says this sprawling campus in Ingersoll, Ontario, the first full-scale electric vehicle plant in Canada, is set to shut down next month, only opening again in the fall at half capacity, putting nearly 500 people out of work.
It's terrible. I mean, it's devastating. It's one thing to get a layoff for a couple of weeks or even a month. It's another thing when they tell you you're not coming back to work.
The facility was retooled just over 2 years ago to shift away from making gas-powered SUVs to build electric delivery vans. But those vans aren't selling, instead piling up in a storage lot.
GM has brought down the price, but initially they were more expensive than the two prime competitors.
GM says the Cami facility is making operational and employment adjustments to balance inventory and align production schedules with current demand. Auto sector tariffs between the U.S. and Canada aren't helping, says the union.
Partly to do with tariffs and partly sales are not what we need. They got to be higher.
It's the second auto plant to temporarily close in the last week. The whole sector now in a state of flux.
This is a very uncertain time for the industry writ large, simply because there are a lot of U.S. policy changes that are having an impact on the U.S. economy and therefore the Canadian economy, and on top of that for vehicle demand.
And it's hanging over the election. Before the layoff announcement, Mark Carney paused his campaign to meet with his Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee.
Impacts that we're starting to see unfortunately in the Canadian economy, particularly in the Canadian labour market. We reviewed our response to those tariffs.
Conservative leader Poilievre also focused on the tariff impact.
As Prime Minister, for as long as these tariffs are in place, there will be no federal sales tax on Canadian-made cars and trucks.
Poilievre, Carney, and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh all responded to the planned closure on social media, expressing sympathy and vowing to help the workers.
And Kyle, this is a real blow to a facility that was supposed to pave the way forward for GM.
Erica, it's a huge plan. It's about 3 kilometers to walk around the facility. There's plenty of space not being used, so workers hope the plant can be retooled yet again to produce other vehicles. For now, though, experts say there's little demand for any type of electric cargo van with the economic problems facing North America. They say it could take several years for sales of these cargo vehicles to pick up.
Okay, Kyle Bax, thanks for this.
Thank you.
Wall Street actually gained on strong earnings from U.S. banks based on figures from before the turmoil of Donald Trump's global tariffs. But as Paul Hunter explains, the trade war between the world's 2 largest economies, the U.S. and China, just keeps heating up.
Be it this AI-generated video floating around social media in China derisively depicting future American workers slowly making what's now assembled in China.
Behavior protocols engaged.
Or this Chinese government video billed as a sci-fi thriller with a robot named Tariff.
Aggressive tariffs implementing now.
enacting U.S. tariffs that hurt the U.S.
Unemployment rates rising, cost of living increasing.
Or if that's not enough, this AI image posted by China's foreign ministry, meant to mock U.S. President Donald Trump and highlight what all Americans may pay for Trump's tariffs, what China now calls Trump's economic bullying. On state TV in Beijing, retaliation. Word China is now ratcheting up its tariffs on American goods to 125%. That's after Trump upped U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods to 145%. The trade war between those two countries now raging.
The president has made it very clear he's open to a deal with China.
At the White House, Trump was said to be, quote, optimistic a deal with China can be struck. But on those fresh Chinese tariffs,
the president made it very clear when the United States is punched, he will punch back harder. And he hopes to make a deal that benefits the American worker and our companies that have been ripped off for far too long.
Trump himself with this post on social media. We're doing really well on our tariff policy. Very exciting for America and the world. U.S. stocks ended the week on an up note, though still lower than before Trump's global tariffs were announced April 2nd. Meanwhile, word from the European Union. If the U.S. doesn't ease up, it too will push back.
We will have to defend our economy, we will have to defend our companies, and also come with countervailing measures.
And on that, said the EU, the European Union is firmly united. Erica.
And Paul, it seems U.S. consumers aren't sharing the same optimism about the economy as the Trump administration.
Yeah, we now have the latest Consumer Sentiment Index by the University of Michigan, kind of a measure of feelings on the economy, leadership, a whole bunch of things. Bottom line is that it's now fallen to its lowest point since the worst of the pandemic, and it's the second lowest reading since the index began in 1952. Americans expect unemployment to go up and likewise prices. And by the way, sentiment dropped steeply for both Democrats and Republicans. Among independent voters, it is now lower than at any point in the presidency of Joe Biden. Not good numbers for Donald Trump, Erica.
Indeed. Thanks for this, Paul Hunter in Washington. We are now more than halfway through the federal election campaign, so let's take a peek at the poll tracker. This is a snapshot of polling averages starting in December. The lead the Conservatives held for so long vanished in mid-March. They now sit at 37.5%. The Liberals pulling ahead to 43.9%. The position's pretty consistent for more than a week. That flip for the Conservatives has sparked a backlash, even as the party pulls in crowds for rallies. Marina von Stackelberg asked the leader about the criticism coming from a fellow Conservative.
Here, Poilievre is leaning on Canada's last Conservative Prime Minister to sell his plan for the economy.
It will be modeled in a lot of ways off the incredible success that Stephen Harper had in the 08-09 crisis.
But Harper's former director of communications is blasting the current Conservative strategy.
This campaign is going to be studied for decades as the biggest disaster.
Corey Teneycke also helped Ontario Premier Doug Ford win 3 elections. This week on the Curse of Politics podcast, he said Poilievre has failed to pivot to the U.S. tariff issue and campaigns too much like Donald Trump. Polls suggest the Conservatives' lead has evaporated.
Blowing a 25-point lead and being like 10 points down is campaign malpractice at the highest level.
Is it campaign malpractice?
No, I answered that question 2 weeks ago. Liberals and lobbyists want me to stop talking about high food prices. Well, I'm not going to do that.
Poilievre faced questions earlier when Conservative insiders spoke out anonymously, calling the campaign highly disorganized. But Poilievre says he's focused on affordability, housing, and crime, all issues Canadians are struggling with in spite of the U.S. president. Harper's former cabinet minister, Jason Kenney, defends this campaign.
Mr. Poilievre has assembled pretty much the broadest Conservative coalition with the most energized campaign I've ever seen in terms of record turnout and fundraising.
And those supporters who flock to Poilievre's rallies say the polls might not tell the whole story.
What I see and what I hear from people that I interact with, the wonderful folks here today, is that there is a epic groundswelling of support for the Conservative Party.
Part of what could hurt the Conservatives is the NDP and Bloc Québécois appear to be losing support. That means many of those voters are likely heading to the Liberals. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
And today, the NDP campaign stopped in Ottawa, and leader Jagmeet Singh was asked by our colleague Ashley Burke about his political future.
Is this your last election?
I'm focused on the campaign in front of me and the choice in front of me. And that's a very important choice. We're up against a real scary time. I want folks to know the choices in this election. The choice is really important. I can tell you, having been in a minority government, when New Democrats were there, we made a big difference in people's lives.
Polls have shown weakening support for the party. Singh is pitching the NDP to hold whichever party forms government accountable. Next week could be a pivotal one in the campaign with both the French and English language leaders' debates. 5 leaders are set to square off in Montreal over 2 nights. Wednesday is the French language debate starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can watch that on CBC News Network or wherever you stream CBC News. Thursday is the English debate. That starts at 7 Eastern. You can also watch that one on CBC television. And on both nights, Adrian will be hosting the National live from Montreal with all your post-debate coverage. Canada's mayors are trying to make climate change a bigger focus in this election. Dozens of local leaders have signed an open letter to the parties detailing what they call bold and achievable action. Sam Sampson takes us through the demands.
Jasper is still recovering from this wildfire that destroyed 1/3 of the town last summer, and the mayor warns something needs to change.
If we can use our experience to help other communities across Canada be prepared for the reality of severe weather and climate change, then at least we have used our disaster to help others.
He's among the dozens of local leaders across Canada who wrote a letter to the main federal parties calling for action on climate change, including a national electric grid, a high-speed railway, and a strategy for the effects of climate disasters. All paid for, they suggest, with redirected fossil fuel subsidies, federal money that supports the production of oil and gas.
If you repurpose that money, which isn't needed, the oil companies make billions, to clean solutions, we can build the clean economy that helps our communities be safe and creates tens, if not hundreds of thousands of good union jobs.
But one expert says federal dollars are needed to attract developers, so Canada remains a major global exporter of the most profitable resources.
I'm on board with trying to deal with greenhouse gases, but we need to do it in a way that makes sense for our country, especially in the face of the Trump tariffs.
Data gathered by CBC News suggests the environment is not a top concern for voters this election. Number one is the Canada-US relationship, which doesn't sit right for some who've been through disasters.
I'm focused right now on helping my businesses, growing my economy so that I can try to, weather this tariff storm the best I can. But a big part of our challenges are coming from the climate emergency.
The Greens and the NDP told CBC News they're committed to the projects laid out in this letter. The Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives did not respond to our requests before deadline, and the Liberals pointed us to their climate change plan, which does not explicitly list what the mayors are asking for. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Edmonton.
Prince Edward Island has confirmed its first measles cases in more than a decade. 2 adults who were not immunized against it. Health officials there say both tested positive after traveling to an area in Canada where there are ongoing outbreaks. Both are now recovered and contact tracing is underway. P.E.I. hasn't seen a measles case since 2013. New details are emerging about the sightseeing helicopter that plummeted into New York's Hudson River, killing all 6 people on board. Alexander Silberman now on the tragedy and the investigation.
A family sightseeing tour of Manhattan's skyline quickly turned to tragedy.
Oh my God! Oh my gosh!
The horrifying final moments of their helicopter flight captured on video. The chopper's tail and rotor appearing to break apart, tumbling out of the sky. Witnesses describe seeing it slam into the Hudson River upside down.
And I saw a helicopter falling to pieces.
out of the blue, I see like a helicopter disintegrate in midair, and then I heard a loud sound.
The crash killed all 6 people on board. Among the victims, Agustin Escobar, an executive with the technology firm Siemens, and his wife and 3 children. This picture, taken just before that fatal flight, part of a trip to celebrate their daughter's 9th birthday.
It's really tragic, and I'm definitely shaken up knowing that I watched this happen to this family outside today.
Pieces of the aircraft still floating in the river Friday as divers search for clues about what caused the deadly crash.
Thank you for joining us.
The National Transportation Safety Board now investigating, urging the public to share any photos and video of the crash.
We need to focus on finding some of the additional components and structures that we're looking for, conduct witness interviews, and gather the records that we need.
To me, it's a mechanical failure.
This expert says it appears one of the blades hit the chopper's tail.
The question is, how did that happen, or why did that happen? They're not going to be able to find exactly what it was without a lot of detailed investigation.
The investigation into the crash expected to take months. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Regina.
Strict new rules are now in place at the U.S. border affecting long-term visitors, including Canadian snowbirds. Anyone 14 or older staying 30 days or more must now register online and carry proof at all times. Those who fail to do so could be fined $5,000 US or face up to 6 months in jail. A controversial immigration ruling out of Louisiana tonight. A judge says the U.S. government can deport a pro-Palestinian protester arrested last month at Columbia University. As Vanessa Lee explains, it's part of a wider crackdown, fueling concern over free speech.
The courtroom we just left tells a damning story.
Outside of the Louisiana detention center where Mahmoud Halil is being detained, his supporters are outraged.
This is a blatant violation of the First Amendment and a dangerous precedent for anyone who believes in free speech and political expression.
You're going to be under arrest.
Federal immigration agents arrested the pro-Palestinian activist at Columbia University last month. He is a permanent resident, his wife an American citizen. He has not been charged with a crime. The government has argued his presence compromises U.S. foreign policy interests, citing a rare statute from 1952. In a 2-page memo entered into evidence, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Halil should be removed for his role in anti-Semitic protests and disruptive activities, which fosters a hostile environment for Jewish students in the U.S.
The intent is clear. It's to chill dissent. This is part of a coordinated effort to crack down on dissent and viewpoints that the administration disagrees with.
Just this week, the U.S. announced it will start screening social media accounts for evidence of anti-Semitic activity as grounds to deny visa and green card applications.
I am the son of a Holocaust survivor, so I'm very sensitive to the issue. But, you know, we have a First Amendment in the United States, and our immigration law is drafted so that people are not supposed to be tossed out of the country based on speech.
Halil is not alone. Among others who say they have been unlawfully detained, this PhD student from Tufts University, accused of taking part in activities in support of Hamas. Lawyers for Halil say they will appeal, calling the hearing a charade of due process. For now, he remains behind bars, with his first child due to be born this month. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
Canadian actor Reynolds is leading a campaign to rename an Ontario arena.
I met a young girl named Grace Bowen.
Coming up, the story of the Ontario girl behind his impassioned plea. Plus, the plans to tackle Canada's shortage of skilled tradespeople.
Conservatives will train 350,000 new apprentices.
We will create an apprenticeship grant.
How the promises stack up. And the brazen theft of a pug named Travis, and how social media helped get him home. We're back in 2. Significant labour shortages in Canada's construction industry highlight the growing need for skilled trade workers to help dig the country out of a national housing shortage. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson looks at the party's plans to boost workers.
With 250,000 workers in construction expected to retire and Canada needing many more homes built, training more skilled trades workers quickly is a big talking point on the campaign trail.
Conservatives will train 350,000 new apprentices over the next 5 years.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also promised to reinstate federal grants for apprentices instituted by Stephen Harper that just expired to the maximum of $4,000. On the Liberal side,
we will create an apprenticeship grant of up to $8,000 for registered apprentices.
also in their plan, $20 million to colleges and doubling the federal funding of the union-led training program to $50 million.
Genuine game changers. They are hugely influential at allowing workers and worker organizations to train their members. It won't be too bad.
This millwright, who's doing a PhD in industrial relations, says the conservative target also makes sense.
Those numbers project population growth, which I think is prudent. I think 350,000 new workers in the construction sector would be to Canada's benefit.
But he says neither plan addresses true barriers to young people entering the trades, like unpredictable hours and locations not compatible with family life or project-based work that doesn't provide financial stability. Both plans focus on funneling money through apprenticeships and unions, but that might not help parts of this country, says this expert.
We're heavily unionized in Quebec in residential construction, and we're heavily unionized in the Greater Toronto area. For the rest of the country, it's largely not unionized.
And all the experts add that Canadians need an attitude shift so young people see the trades as a desirable, well-paying calling that can help build Canada's future. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
The prolific Canadian director behind Weekend at Bernie's and First Blood has died.
Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.
Coming up, the life and work of Ted Kotcheff. Plus, Rosie is here with a special Friday edition of At Issue.
Yeah, hey Erica, we are back from Halifax with a live studio audience. They are asking questions. At Issue is going to try and answer them. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea all here too. That's right after this break.
We're in the business of making people feel better about themselves.
Grey's Anatomy and Euphoria star Eric Dane says he's been diagnosed with ALS, a motor degenerative disease. The 52-year-old made the revelation Thursday in an interview with People magazine. Dane says he plans to continue working. Canadian actor Reynolds is spearheading a push to rename a local Ontario arena in honor of a young girl who died of cancer. The Deadpool star met Grace Bowen a decade ago in what he calls a life-changing encounter. Magda Gebrselassie spoke with her parents about what it would mean to them and the Cobourg community.
She changed my life, really. And
Grace Bowen stole Ryan Reynolds' heart when he met her in 2014. The 9-year-old was battling osteosarcoma, a type of bone cancer.
I was just really taken by Grace. Her name kind of said it all.
Reynolds says Grace helped inspire him to start a fundraising campaign for Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. Grace died a few months later. But since then, the Canadian actor has stayed in touch with her family. A few days ago, Grace's dad told Reynolds about this, the hospital's balloon sculpture, celebrating Sick Kids' 150th birthday and honoring Grace. It stands tall at the community center, housing the Pond Arena in Cobourg, where she once played hockey. Soon after, Reynolds called up the family to say,
I called your mayor today, and I think it's a good idea to rename the arena the Grace Bowen Arena.
Ryan, thank you very much.
On Wednesday, the actor appeared via video at this committee meeting to make the request, leaving the Bowens overwhelmed and hopeful.
It means that her legacy didn't die with her. It means, she's going to continue to inspire.
The request to rename the arena got the support of the committee. Up next, council has to weigh in at the end of the month. Still, community members here think there's only one call to make.
I would say don't take longer than about 3 seconds to make this decision.
This is an amazing opportunity to highlight a local athlete in our community and to 100% approve that.
While the Bowen family waits, they continue to keep Grace's memory alive with a fund named in her honor. Years, they say they've raised about $400,000 for cancer research.
We miss her more every single day, and we think about her every day, and we're just trying to live like Grace.
Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Cobourg.
The Canadian filmmaker who first introduced moviegoers to Vietnam War vet John Rambo has died.
Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.
Ted Kotcheff is best known for directing the classic 80s action flick First Blood, a film he co-wrote with Sylvester Stallone, one of a string of box office hits for the Toronto-born director, which also included the cult classic Weekend at Bernie's. Kotcheff died Thursday at the age of 94. Now Rosie's here with a special Friday edition of At Issue.
Hello, Halifax. Hello, Canada. I'm Rosemary Barton. We are live here with the At Issue panel in Halifax at the Central Library, a beautiful location. The National has been traveling all over the country, as you know, to try to talk to as many voters as possible to make sure we get a sense of what you're considering ahead of the election. This special At Issue is all about you, your choice, your vote, and your questions. And welcome. As I said, we're at this beautiful library in downtown Halifax on a beautiful day, and we have a wonderful live audience who's come out here on Spring Garden Road for this special edition of At Issue. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj, all here with me in person to answer your questions. I don't get to do it. This is all about you guys. Matthew, there you are, sir. Good.
I really appreciate you all coming to Halifax and all that you're contributing towards everything. My question is more of a broad scope question for all government in general. I'm wondering, no matter who the Prime Minister becomes, whatever party it is, will the other parties start to get back towards like an 80s, 90s style, keeping them in check, but working as a collective for progress of the nation as a whole, versus always trying to undermine each other?
Want them to be a little less partisan, do you, Matthew?
I would like them to be a little less partisan, a little bit more collective, keep everybody in check, make the whole nation progress.
But the fact
I don't know.
The fact that this minority parliament has almost lasted the full tenure tells you that there must have been parties, and I don't mean just the NDP, that were willing to be constructive. Otherwise, we would have gone to the polls before Donald Trump came back.
It's true.
I think you're talking mainly about the Liberals and the Conservatives and the way that they play their game in opposition, which I agree has not been constructive, and in particular over the past decade. What we've seen in the House of Commons has not been an adult conversation that people should be proud of. It's been a game of mudslinging versus an alphabet of letters that come out of the government's mouth. No one looked better for it. Will the next parliament be better? I can't tell you that. But I have found over the years that Parliament has become less and less of a place where you want to listen to what is being said, because intelligent human beings are leaving their intelligence at the door.
I think Mr. Coyne may have a few things to say here on this topic. Yes,
I'll be brief. We certainly need to fix our parliament, and there's a whole range of issues that can be discussed about that, to change the incentive so that we reward constructive criticism rather than just name calling, et cetera. But nevertheless, we are in an adversarial system. Some degree of partisanship is part of the mix. I would never want it to go away where people aren't being critical of the government, even if they're just being performative to some extent, because part of the performance is to get people's attention and to focus it. But I will say this, looking at what's going on south of the border, looking at what's going on in some other countries right now, I have my criticisms of both the Liberals and the Conservatives and of their leaders. But I thank God that we still have some kind of a healthy political culture in this country where we're not questioning the results of elections, we're not threatening revenge on our enemies if we get into power.
Yeah.
It's so far, yeah. But at this point, I would say, debates in this country are still more or less between the 45-yard lines. Let's keep it that way. Let's preserve, we have some institutional failings in this country. We've got some things we need to fix in our processes. But that political culture that we have, I think, is an enduring strength.
So much of politics is actually about personalities. And at the moment, I think, under Erin O'Toole, there was a lot of actual constructive work that got done. A lot of backbench MPs. There were got some bills passed with the Liberal support. The Conservatives at the time supported some Liberal government bills. I think Mr. Poilievre's personality and his kind of zero-sum approach to politics, and I think the social media importance, the media landscape shifting, has encouraged people to be more vicious and personal in their criticism, and that has kind of poisoned a little bit of the well. But I think at the moment, the leadership has dictated the tone that has infiltrated the House of Commons.
Okay, Daniel, if you'll stand up, we'll get the mic to you.
Yeah, so what can the media do in the times that we're living now to focus the conversation to what matters to Canadians most before Donald Trump's antics took over?
Well, that's why we're here, to make sure we're talking about the issues that matter most. Chantal?
We do not, and we should not be directing the political conversation. That is for the political leadership to do. And our agenda can't be to have them adopt our agenda. But I think up to a point, Canadians have forced all parties to speak about Donald Trump in a way that many of the parties didn't expect to. But that is how conversations happen politically. It's not the media that determines this. It's you guys. It's voters. If you're forever talking about something that the voters don't care about, and you're trying to avoid that big elephant in the room that people are talking about amongst themselves, you lose. But I'm uncomfortable with the notion that the media should be taking the lead in imposing topics of conversations in an election.
Andrew, but I think, maybe, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but sometimes people are worried about issues and they don't see them reflected back in the media because there's, particularly in this election, a predominant issue.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a predominant issue because it's very clear that's what the public is most concerned about. So these other issues are also important. So A, politicians are going to take their cue from the public. B, I'm not so sure the public is necessarily wrong on this. And it's not to downplay all those other issues, which, I write about them, and I think they're important as well. But let's be clear, Donald Trump is not a normal person. He's not a normal president. Part of his agenda is very clearly to impose some kind of dominance on this country, beyond just being, that big country of the South that's always important in our politics, but to a level that we haven't seen before. Whether it extends as far as attempting to annex us, who knows? But clearly, he's not going to be shy about trying to impose his will on us in all kinds of ways that we wouldn't like. Well, sovereignty, our ability to make decisions in our own right for our own interests, that's key to everything else. If we can't be a sovereign, self-governing country, we can't solve poverty, we can't deal with inflation, we can't fix our deficit, we can't work on the environment, we can't do any of those things in the way that we would want to do. We will have our freedom of maneuver circumscribed in various ways that we would find intolerable. So finding a way to address this challenge, both the short-term challenge of the tariffs and whatever else he's throwing at us, but also the longer-term challenge that pretty clearly over the next few years, he is going to be in our face in a whole variety of different ways. I think that is an imperative issue. I think that is a priority issue.
30 seconds or so to you, Althea.
I don't know what Donald Trump is thinking, so I'm glad Andrew knows, because
we talk regularly.
I feel like the more I think I know what's going on in the White House, the clearer I don't. I think that we are trying to reflect what Canadians are telling us that they care about. And I do think from what we hear, and frankly, a lot of MPs, especially during elections, do a far better job than we do communicating directly with voters because they're knocking on doors, and what they're telling us, whether they're Liberal MPs or Conservative MPs or Green MPs or New Democrat MPs or Black MPs, I actually haven't spoken to that many PPC MPs, but is that Donald Trump is the thing that comes up at the door all the time. And so I think it's normal that that is, or usual, that that would be what we are talking about.
And they are putting lots of other things in the window. There's lots of talk about housing. There's lots of talk about energy development. Those things are out there. We have a platform tracker. You can go and see where people are on certain issues.
And if they were, if they were getting a lift from them, they'd be talking about
them more.
You know, if crime was working for Poilievre, he'd be talking about crime even more than he is.
We talk about issues that have legs and issues that don't. It doesn't mean that some are important and some are not. But in this election, the issue that has legs, that will take it to the ballot box on April 28th, is Trump. There is no doubt about that. Now, I covered the free trade election in '88. There were other topics. I don't think anybody remembers them. What I remember is for 4 weeks, we talked about the free trade agreement. What did we not talk about? The incoming GST and the Meech Lake Accord. What did we talk about for 3 or 4 years after the election? The Meech Lake Accord and the GST. So, yes, elections capture moments. In this case, I agree with Andrew, it's going to last longer than we've settled this on April 28th, and we can move on to those other issues. But elections are like that. There is an overriding issue that takes over the conversation, and everything else that is on offer kind of slips past the attention of voters.
Especially when it's the shortest election period that it can be, which this one is. Okay, we have much more from the Central Library here in beautiful downtown Halifax. This is a special edition of At Issue Canada Votes. We will be right back. As Canada gets ready to vote, we are here in downtown Halifax at their beautiful library with a special live audience for At Issue. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea all here to take questions from this very energized crowd as they decide how they're going to vote. Louis?
With the situation south of the border dominating our attention, leadership has clearly become the ballot box issue for this election. Predominantly due to leadership, I've never seen such a change in public opinion in Canada over the last 2 months. And with that in mind, I reflect on the recent United States election where just 2.5 weeks before the election, Kamala Harris led in the public opinion. My question to the panel is, what opportunities do you see for the two leaders to make a change or to secure the win? What strategies might you suggest that we'll see or that they should implement if they want to become the next Prime Minister of Canada?
Louis, thank you for that. So I'll tell you one thing, they're not going to tell them what to do. These guys don't do that because they would that's not their job. But very quickly, because I'm going to try and get through more questions, what is the likelihood that things could change over the next 2.5 weeks?
I've seen debates change elections, but usually when they take place in the early part of the campaign, not at the tail end of them. That being said, you talk about two leaders, but I think to change the trend, Mr. Poilievre needs Jagmeet Singh and Yves-François Blanchet to suddenly get voters' attention, their own voters. And so far that hasn't happened. But it's not on Pierre Poilievre to win the debate, to win the election. It's on Jagmeet Singh and Yves-François Blanchet to get their vote back from the Liberals.
Andrew?
I think the debate is the last chance. I think Chantal's right about the inter-party dynamic. I also think that, maybe I'm making a hostage to fortune here, but I do think things have kind of baked in a little bit. I've been struck by how much the Tories have thrown at Mark Carney and how little it seems to have affected anything. In fact, at least one pollster says his personal estimation, the public estimation of him has gone up in the course of the campaign, which is very rarely happens. I think his biography and his persona, and there are things you can criticize about each of them, but In a time of serious crisis, a certain proportion of the voters are looking at that and going, that's what I want. And it's hard to see what would shake them off of that. We'll see.
Quickly to you, Althea.
I agree with everything Chantal and Andrew have both said. The debate will be the pivotal moment, and then the long weekend where people get together with their families and hash it out, and it's advanced polls, and like, do you get influenced by what your children are telling you about how much they like Pierre Poilievre and what he wants to do to housing, or does the grandpa convince you that, like, no, Donald Trump is the greatest threat, and you should vote for the calm, collected guy? Who knows?
Yeah. Okay, I have time for one last question, I'm told. Fiona.
With reconciliation ongoing in Canada, UNDRIP becoming law, and long-term matters like land rights, housing shortages, economic development, child welfare, access to clean drinking water, and systemic violence and racism, my question is, in your view, how seriously are Canada's major parties addressing Indigenous priorities in the 2025 federal election?
Fiona, thank you for that. Althea, you want to take a...
So I think we're starting to have the discussion, but it's framed into who they want to be speaking to, as opposed to, I guess, previous ways that we have discussed the conversation. And interestingly enough, we're not really talking about reconciliation. Yeah. We're talking about courting Indigenous communities' votes based on certain policy issues, rather than rebuilding the relationship in the way that Prime Minister Trudeau talked about it.
Quickly, Andrew, Chantal?
Well, it's to some extent gone more on the back burner than it would have been 2, 3, 4 years ago. I don't think people should kid themselves that it's not going to come back again. So there's a lot of eagerness now. Let's get resources to market. Let's build pipelines. Let's tear away, impediments and regulatory obstacles. Okay, that's great. But if people think that the Indigenous consent issue is going to just miraculously disappear, they're kidding themselves. It's still going to be a very important thing, and maybe we can find better ways and more streamlined ways to deal with that. But it's still going to be with us.
I also don't think the Canadian public would allow reconciliation to fall by the wayside. Maybe that's naive of me, but...
Well, it shows you to be an optimist, which is a good beginning. I believe that the Canadian voters do not have a short attention span, but they do get fatigued with issues. That includes reconciliation, as it included bilingualism, Quebec. That is what happens. But I do agree that you can't shop Indigenous consent. And pick and choose, and I've got one consent, so I don't need anybody else. But at some point, we also have to recognize the fact that the Indigenous community is diverse and it's got diverse interests. That's normal. Yeah. And not everybody is going to say the same thing all the time, and not everybody is going to win every time. That is also part of the to and fro. As for parties approaching different groups, that is how parties have always dealt with Quebec, that they speak to different constituencies based on different approaches to policy. So I'm not surprised that that is where we are, but it's better to be there than not be at the table.
We are going to leave it there for the National. Big thank you to everyone here in Halifax, at the library, at CBC Nova Scotia. This is just part of the conversation here in Halifax. You can find the rest on the National's YouTube channel and, of course, the At Issue podcast. And this weekend, we'll rebroadcast it on CBC News Network and wherever you stream CBC News. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Rosie. Coming up, a Canadian reality TV contestant recovers her stolen pug.
My head wasn't there. I was just crying and I was yelling. I called my best friend for her to come out my house.
How he ended up back in her arms in our moment. You're looking at Skyzea Senecal, a former contestant on Love Island, Quebec, cuddling with her pug Travis, who was stolen from her apartment earlier this week. Luckily, with a little help from some social media sleuths, Travis is back in her arms, safe and sound. So tonight, this canine recovery makes our moment.
Travis is my first baby. He's like a little sky. He's my best friend and he's everybody's best friend. So on Monday, I had a photo shoot at 8 o'clock. When I got home, my dog wasn't there. So we called the owner to get the security cameras. And that's when I realized that there was a man that came inside my house 6 minutes after I left. You see my dog like all happy to go for a walk. My head wasn't there. I was just crying and I was yelling. I called my best friend for her to come out my house. Everybody posted, all my friends posted. There was this influencer that was on Instagram. I think he's Italian and he just arrived in Montreal. And he just said like, oh, pugs are passengers in Montreal. And when I saw that, I was like, that's my dog. There's this girl that texted me on Instagram saying, you're gonna have your puppy. I just saw him. I called the police. We gave him all the information, so you should have him anytime soon. And then maybe 24 hours after that, I got a call from the police and they said they had my dog. My best friend's mom, I went to her house. She went to go get him a big chicken and we made him like a big good meal with full of cookies. Do whatever you want. You want to bark for an hour? It's all good. I just don't want to lose you. It's fine.
Now, apparently, the man who took Travis away is known to police. He was arrested and charged with breaking and entering. But Travis, the pug, was unharmed. He remains a happy and chill pug. That's almost a reality show in and of itself. Thank you for being with us. You can watch us anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Erica Johnson. Take care.